Alright, welcome. So in this video now, we're going to be developing fully the rest of the program, making the ordinary number guessing game become an interactive game that multiple users can use and play and declare the winner. So we want to develop this level. We're going to be um, uh, uh, coding the error handling side of the program. We're going to include the error handling features as we spoke in the last video that we don't want that when we ask a number from the user, the number has to guess a number, and the user for some reason instead types a letter or a character which is not a number. So we want to handle that. We want to make sure that the program outputs a user-friendly message and asks the user to input another number. Let's begin with the error handling side of it. So remember when we said when they ask a user to input a number, it saves it in start num, and then it will convert that to int. The reason why our program breaks when the user enters a character which is not a number is because when we are casting that into an integer, then the program is not able to cast a j or a letter into an integer, so it breaks. So we'll have to take care of that. Let's run it and see. Let me show you what I mean. So when we say get enter start num, when we enter 2, remember here we had it here. So let me just put this thing side by side like this for better understanding. Yep. Okay. Now, so when we cast this into integer, it will well, instead of 2 number range, let's say I put a character k. So when it wants to cast this, it breaks. So this area here is where the breaking is coming from. So this is where we're seeing the breakage. So what it says here is value error, invalid literal. Let me expand this. Value error, invalid literal for int. You see this function int is trying to call the function int and pass in k, so it can't convert k into an integer. Okay, that's what this line is basically saying. So this where when it breaks, it tells us what the break is, where the break is. See this where at this line where we said start num is equal to int start num, so it cannot convert the k into an integer, it cannot cast the k into an integer. So what we need to do now is we need to use the try exception code block where to catch the error and catch it, receive the shock and just push a user-friendly message to the user instead of a user getting a crash of the system. So which is usually not the best way to design your software. So what we need to do now is when we ask the user to input a start range, a start num, when we come to cast that number into integer, we should cast that inside a try block. Okay, so what I mean is you come here and say try. Okay, then you put this here. Okay, make sure it's okay there. Try, and then accept value error, because that's the type of error we saw there. We saw value error type. Okay, value error. Then in this value error block, this is where you write what you want the program to tell the user. So let's say we want the program to print to the user to display that's not a number. Okay, we close our exclamation mark, and then we close our parentheses. So this is what we want to see happened. So when the user inputs a number, and while we're trying to cast that number into an integer, if it is an integer, it will cast normally. But if it is not, then instead of breaking, as we saw earlier with those red lines of code, instead of the system breaking and crashing out, which is not good of a software, we want the user to see a user-friendly message telling the user that you actually didn't put a number. okay, and maybe let's run this one and see. Okay, run this one and see. Okay, let's say if we put a number, it works. Okay, now no problem. Let's run it now with a wrong number. Okay, and the starting num, then I say k. Before, when we input k, because it's not an integer, it's a character, it's going to break. But let's see what happens this time. It doesn't break. Say, oh, that's not a number. But the difference is that it goes to the next line. Enter the set the end of random range. We're going to see how we're going to do this to make sure it doesn't go to the next line until. So this is where we are. So it says this is what's happening here. That's not the number. But a good software will make sure that you don't go to this number. It doesn't ask you this until you've corrected this. So we're going to see how the system is going to keep asking. I'm going to say I'm going to write that code that will allow the system to keep asking the user once the user keep putting in characters which are not numbers, until the user puts in a character which is valid before it asks the next number. We're going to see that in the next stage. So let's make sure we do the same thing on this enum. When it asks the enum, then before it casts the enum, because as it is now, if we put a character here, it's going to break. Now we have handled the start num, we need to handle the end num and every number here and the guess num and whatever. Wherever there's a need for inputting a number and all these places here, we need to cast those as well. So it means we have to repeat this the try exception block with the start num as well. This is the end num here. No, not like that. Okay, let me say I put it here. Okay, and I just take this end num, I replace the start num with. That's easy like that. I'm lazy, I don't want to be writing code all the time. I like to copy and paste, makes life easy. Okay, so when I run that, okay, and I enter let's say J, let's say S for start, before it breaks, but now it's going to tell me that's not a number. Then it goes to the end number. Let's say E for end. Okay, E for end. Now before it will break, but now it's going to tell me that's not a number. Oh, it breaks this time. Let me see what happened. Set to blue. What's happened now? End num is going to in end num valid. What did we do? Did we even? Oh, right. We didn't take this one out. So we are replacing this. So I should take this one out. Yeah. So let's run it again. All right, so start S for start. Okay, that's not the number. E for end. Okay, that's not the number. I goes on to go to the guess. Okay, obviously these are all wrong, so you cannot say guess a number between S and E. This is definitely wrong programming, so we don't want to see that in our software. So that's what's happening. But you see now that something's happening here. We keep repeating this try block, the try exception block, every time we are asked to put a number. Let's say we have a very long line of lines of coding, and we have hundreds of places where user needs to input a number. When we keep repeating this kind of code like this, that means every time we have to repeat the try exception block, and we're going to fill up try exception block everywhere. Wouldn't it be nice to create a function that does that just once? We write the code once, and everyone that needs to check an input from the user, whether it's a number, can just call the function and say, hey, you function, check this number. You call the function, pass in the number that you receive from the user, send the number to that function, and the function checks it for you and gives you reply if it is number or not. That would be cool, right? So instead of writing the same code here and everywhere where there's number, we can just create a function here. So at the top here, at the very top here, we can start by saying let's name our function. Let's call our function. Give me a second there.